Well, prior to the legislation being passed, it was really hit and miss. I mean, victims were not guaranteed the right to provide information into the system, be it the juvenile justice system or the adult system. So the legislation kind of paved the way, kind of opened that door, cracked that door into the various agencies that dealt with the perpetrator or their offender. And it guaranteed that they were going to get information, they were going to be involved in the process. You know, when victims are hurt by crime, it's a very traumatic thing, and there's a great sense of loss of control. And providing this legislation opened the door up. So.
Well, crime victims now are an integral part of the criminal justice system and have a voice where they didn't have that before. They are able to request the correctional and juvenile justice agencies to be notified of when offenders are released.
If the offender was arrested, if they're at a bail hearing, if they're at a probation hearing, or if they were incarcerated or escaped, or whatever the case may be, the victim was guaranteed some information and some involvement with that offender, and that's important.
The money was put into the budget for covering the cost of the sexual assault exams. That was put into the State Office of Victim Assistance.
The Crime Victims Council actually is made up of victims themselves. We have 12 board members. They range from victims who, had a child that was sexually abused, DUI, criminal domestic violence, all sorts and types of infractions against them. So they have a unique understanding. Well, I just, it's really important to crime victims that they're heard, that law is changed to be more of a balance for them. And people are saying, well, are you trying to take privileges and rights away from defendants? Not at all. I tend to think that crime victim rights are parallel rights, that they're parallel to the rights of the defendant. And that is, what we need to keep in mind. And we're never going to be done, I don't think, having to do those things and to be vigilant and to keep up with that, because most of the money lies on the side of helping the defendant, which I am in favor of. If I'm ever accused of something, I definitely want all of my rights. But as a crime victim, I want my rights as well. And we need to be ever mindful of that.
Well, there's a number of things that I think would improve the delivery of services to crime victims. Right now, there is not a consistency in the level of victim advocacy services from county to county. In spite of funding that has been provided through fines and fees to the counties, there really is a disparity when you look at a lot of the rural counties in the state. There is no forensic nurse examiner program in the hospitals in the state to collect proper evidence for sexual assault and other victims, and that's something that really needs to be addressed in South Carolina. There's a whole range of issues associated with domestic violence and sexual assault in terms of the need for increased public awareness, training, additional services for domestic violence victims. And human trafficking is an issue that needs to have much more attention in South Carolina. And while there's a coalition in place, a human trafficking task force, there's a number of increased services that need to be provided to human trafficking victims. There needs to be much more training available online for victim advocates in the state, and there would be a lot of value in having a junior peer advocate program in conjunction with the education system to get students involved in providing victim support services. Lastly, the faith-based community could be involved much more in collaboration with victim advocacy efforts to train a cadre of folks in the churches across the state to provide victim support services in coordination with law enforcement victim advocates who are located in each of the counties.
Well, I think if anybody working in the justice system, we become aware of the depth and the harm that's caused to people who are victims of crime. And that's important not only from a professional sense to know, when a crime's committed, the depth of hurt that's caused to a victim. But, we see it through a different lens when you're looking at justice as a victim looks through justice. So it's basically caused the juvenile justice system and the adult probation and parole system and the adult correctional system to change the way we do business. We're a little more compassionate. We're not completely there yet, but we've become a little more compassionate and understanding of what victims go through. And it gives a more comprehensive approach really at providing justice, not only to the offender, but of course to the person that's been harmed. We've evolved in 30 years, but there's still work to be done. I would think the future, if I had to speak about the future, I would love to see people who are working in the justice system, who are working with victims, who are victim advocates, who are working with offenders. I would love to see them work in prevention. Ultimately, we'd like to see fewer and fewer crimes, fewer and fewer victims. So I think everybody that's working in the system needs to reach the front end. We need to work with children who are abused and neglected, get them before they become victims of crime, to help curb that. Most kids who grow up in, say, a domestic violence home, they are victims first. They view the harm, the damages caused by domestic violence, and then at some point they learn how to deal with anger that way. Domestic violence is a learned behavior. So a child who views that, experiences that, oftentimes expresses that as an adult. So getting to that child early and providing some prevention and some buffer systems for that child, some support system for that child, you're going to see fewer and fewer victims and fewer crimes. So I think everybody in the business, we have to focus ourselves on the front end to do prevention work. Providing victim services is more reactive. So I would love to see the future to be more proactive. And then last, I hope 10, 20, 30 years from now, we won't call it a criminal justice system. We won't call it a juvenile justice system. It'll just be a justice system. So it's not just for the criminal or for the offender, but it's also just for the victim. It should be a system that's comprehensively just.